The Vajont Dam is still standing. 262 meters of concrete, curved into the gorge like a blade fitted to its sheath. It has not moved, cracked, or failed since the day it was finished. By any engineering measure, it is a success. It has outlived the men who built it, the company that owned it, and the country that nationalized it. It has also outlived nearly 2,000 people who lived in its shadow. This is not a story about a dam that failed. It is a story about a dam that worked exactly as designed, on the one night it mattered most, and that is precisely why it is a horror story. In 1929, an Italian energy company called SOD identified the Vajont Gorge, a narrow cut in the Dolomites between two mountains, as close to perfect for a dam. Steep walls, tight throat, enormous storage potential for very little concrete. Construction moved forward through the 1950s under Chief Engineer Carlo Semenza, one of the most respected dam designers in Europe. By 1959, the structure was nearly complete, 262 meters tall, one of the tallest dams on Earth, a genuine feat of engineering. Then, in March of that year, a landslide at one of SOD's other dams, Ponte Toc, killed a caretaker. It was a small tragedy by the standards of what was coming, but it was enough to make SOD nervous about the ground itself, not just the concrete going into it. So the company did the responsible thing. It commissioned a geological survey of the Vajont Valley before filling the new reservoir. The survey was led by a young geologist named Edoardo Semenza, Carlo Semenza's own son, working alongside Austrian geotechnical engineer Leopold Müller and Italian geologist Franco Giudici. Edoardo mapped the slopes above the reservoir in the summer of 1959. What they found should have ended the project. The northern flank of Monte Toc, the mountain rising directly above the reservoir, was not solid bedrock. It was the remains of an ancient landslide, a mass of loosened rock and clay that had slid once before, in prehistory, and had never fully restabilized. Filling a reservoir against it meant saturating the base of a slope that history had already shown could move. This finding was not buried. It was written down, by name, by the son of the man building the dam, a year before filling even began. Reservoir filling began in 1960. By November, with the water at roughly 600 to 650 meters elevation, the mountain answered. Somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million cubic meters of rock broke free from Monte Toc and dropped into the reservoir. It produced a wave roughly 10 meters high. No one died. No structure was seriously damaged. In hindsight, it is the cheapest warning a mountain has ever given. At the same time, a massive crack opened across the northern slope, tracing the shape of the letter M, over 2.5 kilometers long. It was not subtle. It was not deniable. It was the mountain drawing its own fault line for anyone willing to look. SOD lowered the reservoir and commissioned further study, including a physical scale model built to simulate how a larger slide might displace the water. This was due diligence on paper, but it was also delay. The company had already sunk enormous capital into a dam that was structurally complete and financially useless until it held water. Then, in October 1961, Carlo Semenza died of a cerebral hemorrhage. His deputy, Alberico Biadine, took over as chief engineer. Shortly afterward, Edoardo Semenza's consulting role on the project was quietly discontinued. The man who had personally mapped the danger, whose own father had commissioned the survey that found it, was no longer part of the conversation. The mountain kept moving. The filling resumed. Through 1962 and into 1963, the reservoir climbed toward levels it had never reached. Monitoring stakes driven into the slope showed the ground creeping, slowly at first, in a way that could be explained away as normal settling if you wanted it to be. The summer of 1963 was unusually wet. The reservoir rose toward 250 meters of depth, roughly 30 meters beyond what SOD's own engineers had informally treated as a safe ceiling. As the water climbed, so did the mountain's movement. Centimeters per day became the new baseline. By late September, the slope was creeping at around 20 centimeters a day. This is not an abstract engineering figure. This is a mountainside moving fast enough to watch, if you stood in the right place for long enough. The mayor of Erdo, one of the two villages closest to the reservoir, issued his own warning to residents, urging evacuation. The mayor of Casso did the same. These were local officials, not geologists, reading a landscape that scientists had already told them was unstable 4 years earlier. Compliance was partial. People had homes, livestock, lives built around a lake that provided both danger and, ironically, tourism and fishing income. No one with the authority to empty the reservoir did so. At 10:39 p.m. on October 9, 1963, the slope failed completely. An estimated 270 million cubic meters of rock and earth, roughly the volume of a small mountain in its own right, broke away from Monte Toc and dropped into the reservoir in 30 to 45 seconds. The reservoir did not have room for it. The displaced water had nowhere to go but up and over. Within the narrow basin, the wave reached a total height of approximately 250 meters. As it struck the far canyon wall, the initial run-up climbed even higher, an estimated 235 to 260 meters above the reservoir surface, scouring bare rock that still shows the scar today. Then it turned back on itself and went over the dam crest, cresting the structure by 100 to 150 meters. The dam held. The wave did not need it to fail. It went around the problem entirely, over the top, down the far side, and into the Piave Valley below, where the town of Longarone stood almost directly in its path. By the time the water reached the canyon mouth and spread into the broader valley, it still carried a flood depth of roughly 70 meters. That was enough. Longarone lost 1,269 of its 1,328 at-risk residents. A 94% fatality rate in minutes at night while most of the town was asleep. The nearby villages of Fay, Perego, Rivalta, and Villanova were destroyed alongside it. In total, the disaster killed somewhere between 1,910 and 1,917 people, the exact number permanently uncertain because the wave did not just kill, it erased. Roughly 400 victims were never recovered, buried under mud and debris too deep and too total to excavate. The dam itself sustained almost no damage. It is, technically, one of the most successful pieces of civil engineering of the 20th century. In the aftermath, Saad and the Italian government's first public position was that this had been an act of God. An unforeseeable natural catastrophe. Nothing could have been done. This was not true, and the paper trail proved it. In 1968, 11 Saad executives and government officials were indicted on charges including culpable disaster and multiple counts of aggravated manslaughter. The trial was moved to L'Aquila, hundreds of kilometers from the Piave Valley, a decision widely understood at the time as insulation from local public fury rather than a neutral venue choice. By the time the Italian Court of Cassation issued its final rulings in 1971, the 11 defendants had been winnowed down by acquittal, appeal, and death. Carlo Semenza never faced trial. He had died 2 years before the disaster and was posthumously cleared. Mario Pancini, a Saad engineer, died by suicide the night before proceedings began. Of those who remained, Alberico Biadine, the engineer who succeeded Semenza and kept the reservoir filling, was convicted of failing to warn residents and order a timely evacuation. He was sentenced to 6 years, reduced to 5, and ultimately served roughly 1 year after partial commutation. Francesco Sensidoni, a regional Ministry of Public Works engineer, was convicted alongside him for the same failure to act. Curzio Badaini, president of the High Council of Public Works, was convicted at the lower court level, though his final status shifted through Italy's layered appeals process. Augusto Getty, the university professor who built and ran the scale model meant to predict exactly this kind of failure, was acquitted. The court's reasoning: the true scale and velocity of the slide had been technically unpredictable. The model built to predict it did not save the man who built it from that conclusion, nor did it save the valley. This is the actual verdict of Vajont, underneath the sentencing. The people who commissioned the warning, and the people who acted on it by walking away, were removed from the story before it ended. The people who stayed, who ran the tests, who signed off on continued filling, mostly walked free or served a fraction of what the death toll might suggest they owed. The dam is still standing. You can visit it today. Walk across the crest, look down at the gorge, and the concrete will tell you nothing went wrong here. Structurally, nothing did. 262 meters of engineering, holding back a lake that no longer needs holding back, over a valley that no longer needs protecting, because the people it was built to serve are the reason it became famous in the first place.